This is all theater. This is all just political theater.
Political theater. Political theater.
Pure political
Theater.
Theater.
Political theater.
The
nefarious,
Significant and protracted
political theater for political theater's sake.
I yield back.
From Washington, this is Political Theater, Roll Call's review of the spectacle of politics on Capitol Hill and across the country. I'm Jason Dick. This has been a momentous week for politics. Jury selection started in the criminal trial of former President Donald Trump in New York. The Senate dispensed with the impeachment articles against Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. And the House faces a leadership crisis as it considers a foreign aid package that has made Speaker Mike Johnson a target of his unhappy colleagues. But there was a lot more going on beyond just those headlines. FEC filings showed us how the campaign for control of the House and Senate is going. Runoffs in Alabama set the field for a competitive House race there. And there is another developing criminal trial of a prominent politician that could affect the November elections. Roll Call's campaign editor Herb Jackson joins us to discuss all of these and more. Herb, welcome back to Political Theater, even though you're just right over there.
Hi, Jason. Yeah, here I am.
So again, this is one of those weeks where history may sort of record it. This is the very first criminal trial of a former president of the United States. Jury selection is ongoing there, even as we're speaking. The Senate sort of made quick order of the impeachment articles of Mayorkas. The House is still trying to figure out its way on these foreign aid packages and the fate of Mike Johnson. Our colleague John Bennett reported that one of the senators up on the Hill today was asked about whether the Senate would stay in, if the House passes this package. And Jim Langford, Republican of Oklahoma, told John, we don't even know if there's going to be a speaker on Saturday, so who knows? So there's a lot going on. There's a lot of historical value to this week, and it will be significant regardless. But there's also all this other stuff going on, and that's where we come in. So let's talk about first the Alabama runoffs down in the is it the Yellowhammer State? Is that what the Alabama is? The nickname, the sobriquet. So in Alabama, there were runoffs that were set up in the earlier primary for the 2nd district, which is redrawn by the legislature to comply with a Supreme Court order that it was unconstitutional the way it had been drawn, that particularly more blacks needed to be involved in the voting process for that. And what happened in Alabama for these runoffs, because we had runoffs both in the Democratic field and the Republican field.
Right. I mean, it was interesting. Once the map was set, it seemed like this was a pickup for the Democrats. But two Republicans were spending about $1 million of their own money to get the nomination to run. This is now a district that Joe Biden would have carried by 12 points over Donald Trump in 2020. So a Democrat should do okay there. And they nominated an attorney, Caroline Dobson, who, as I said, put in about $1 million of her own money. The Democrats had two people running, a state legislative leader and a gentleman named Shamari Figures, who's from a political family in Alabama. He had served in the Obama administration in the White House and in the Justice Department. Shamari Figures won the nomination. He's, the rating from our friends at Inside Elections is that this is a likely Democratic seat. And from what I saw on the social media on Tuesday night, Jacob Rabashkin in Inside Elections said that the Republicans had been hoping the other guy would win the Republican nomination. So Dobson, the winner, has not run for office before. So, this looks like a good chance for a pickup for the D's. As far as we can tell right now, we still gotta go run the race now.
Right. And of course, because that's not enough drama, we also have the possibility that Joe Biden might not be on the ballot at all in Alabama because of a standoff between the campaign and the Democratic National Committee and the Alabama Secretary of State. What do we know about where that is? And this has to do with, there's a statute that says like you have to have the official nominee at a certain point before the November elections, and
Right.
because
There's
the
there's a
convention,
deadline to put names on the ballot in November, and the Democratic convention is after that deadline. So Biden will not be nominated at that point, even though there's no chance that somebody else will be nominated. And I'm honestly not up. I don't have the latest on that, but I know that this is going to be an interesting one there and in a couple of other states, including Ohio, where it is important. I mean, there is going to be a fight for that nomination. But it's interesting, you and I were saying the other day that, when there was a possibility that Trump wouldn't be on the ballot in some states, it was an outrage.
and a
It went
Supreme
to the
Court
Supreme
case.
Court. Now but the Democrats could, just hold the convention here and nominate Joe Biden. And
Maybe they could do it on like Zoom or Teams or something like that, and just do it that way. And then the convention in Chicago is more ceremonial.
That's what they did 4 years ago, right? I mean, nobody left Delaware, right? So,
yeah. So yeah, just a little bit of added drama there. Okay. Second sort of item I wanted to pick your brain about and talk about the story that you and your team wrote was based on FEC filings. This is for the first quarter of 2024, January to March 31st. So we got a peek at who was raising money, how much they were raising for their races, and how much cash they had on hand. And what's the big takeaway from you and your team for those FEC filings in what seems to be an arms race? So, I know people are not thrilled sometimes about the martial sort of metaphors or warlike metaphors we have, but it seems like there's just an immense amount of money being, raised in this election.
There is, and let's be clear, we're talking, what we looked at was the candidates themselves and their fundraising committees. There's a whole lot of money that also goes into super PACs, but it is also true that when the super PAC buys an ad, they pay a whole lot more for airtime than the candidates will because of, candidates get some rights to the airwaves because they're owned by the public. And so one of the things that stood out to us was that House Republicans in battleground races, as defined by our friends at Inside Elections, which is anybody who's not in a solid D or solid R race, the House Democrats, on average, outraised the House Republicans by more than 20%. And, including in some of the races that we've known for a while are going to be the real battlegrounds. It's like this. There's 5 districts in New York that, Democrats have been targeting. They put a whole lot of staff into New York. They didn't expect to lose a lot of these seats in New York in 2022, and they want them back now.
Right.
And those candidates had I don't know what it takes to raise $250,000 or $400,000 when people can give a maximum of $3,300. But it seems meager when somebody else is posting $1 million or $1.3 million. So, those races, the Democrats are well positioned. In some of them, they still have a little less cash on hand than the Republican incumbents. And it's possible, our reporter, Mary Ellen McIntyre, was saying to me, it's possible that they spent 2023 tapping their donors and were expecting that to build coming into 2024, and that didn't happen. But is it also possible that, given what the House Republicans have been doing with each other, that this is the people who don't want to give somewhere, or maybe if they're going to put money in, they're not going to do it to elect New York Republicans, because those are the ones who are not MAGA enough? I don't know. There's no way for me to know right now where that's working. However, there are still very rich people who want to see Republicans control the House next year. One guy wrote a $4 million check to a super PAC that's affiliated with the House Republicans, and directed that it be spent on 4 races. So that one guy's $1 million each is worth a lot more than $3,300, even after the lower rates.
And of course, the flip side of it, though, too, is that a super PAC spending on behalf of candidates is not legally, at least, coordinating with the candidates themselves. So messaging, ad buys, that kind of stuff can't be run through the campaign. So sometimes maybe they're simpatico, maybe you even have former staffers, for that member, or former campaign officials for that member who are in the super PAC. But it's not a not a given that it's always an unalloyed good or in sync with the message that the candidate wants.
Yeah, I mean, I've
to
seen
send.
races where the party money, the super PAC money came in and was pushing a message that didn't really help the candidate in that district because they were just pushing the national message, and it was the wrong candidate who was not emphasizing that piece. But it's still better to have the money working for you or against your opponent than to not have it. So
And also, just to back up a little bit about, you mentioned those New York races. These are primarily Hudson River Valley and on Long Island. This is like Nick LaLotta and Anthony D'Esposito and Mike Lawler. They ran good races and won in a somewhat favorable environment for Republicans, but also had to deal with some of the headwinds that they're not, as you said, like super MAGA. Some of them are in favor of abortion rights. Some of them differ from sort of what's developing as party kind of positions.
dogma.
But yes, dogma. Thank you. Oh, that's a good word. MAGA dogma. And in California too, especially in some of those counties surrounding Los Angeles and Orange County and the Central Valley, and without those Republicans winning in 2022, Democrats retain the House. I mean, like as you mentioned, like the Democrats didn't really expect to lose, particularly those New York seats, but that's the margin. That's the 5-vote margin right there, is easily
Yeah,
found.
I mean,
A
we had
handful of races in California, a handful in New York.
we have a bunch of districts that have been realigned. I mean, there's little doubt that there's going to be at least a 3 Republican seat pickup in North Carolina because the Supreme Court changed its decision on what was allowed under the state constitution, and there could be a 4th one. One of the most competitive races is also in North Carolina. If Republicans sweep all 4 of those, that offsets
Yep.
a lot of the others. So where this math comes down, it's going to be a close house no matter which party is in control.
And that when we see how well that works with the current House.
Well, I mean, they did choose to make the motion to vacate a 1-vote motion.
One person
which,
can offer.
Which, from what I read this morning, could be changing.
So yeah, it's also more outside of New York and California. We tend to focus on that because those are very expensive races, and they're very they happen to be in media markets and so forth. But there are also a handful of other competitive races, like Don Bacon in Nebraska, the Omaha-based district there. I mean, he also didn't raise as much money
right.
as his opponent. So there's, again, the trend is that they didn't get as much. Now the cash on hand is a different ball of wax, though, because even though some of the Republicans got outraised, the incomes got outraised, the Democrats a lot of them don't have nearly as much money on hand as somebody.
Right. Well, they started running while the incumbents knew they would have a race the minute they took office. But let's not lose the sight of that, the fact that this is the majority party. The Republicans majority party usually can tap a vein of PAC money that challengers can't. PACs generally do not give to challengers because you can't do anything for me. I need the guy who's going to have a vote on the floor. That's the way PACs look at it. So the fact that Democrats are overcoming these people, even when they have the PAC option there, and Democrats, many of them have said they won't take PAC money. So this is actual messaging that reaches Democratic-based voters who are actually making contributions, many of them in amounts $200 or less. Some of these candidates, I'm not talking about the ones in the battlegrounds, but some of these candidates have $1, $2, $3 million in amounts of $200 or less, which is a lot of people responding to an email and writing a check.
I always liked that a lot of members would make the name of their campaign committee or their reelection campaign something along the lines of a whole lot of people for Bobby Mack, or whoever is running, I always thought that was crooked, and I'm like, oh, this is why, because they're trying to emphasize that they've got this wide base
Friends of
support.
Jason Dick.
Friends of Jason Dick, but no, I think there was one. There was it might have been Raul Grijalva in Arizona. Of course, there's an Arizona connection with me, and there's always a New Jersey connection with Herb. Years ago, and it may still be his reelection campaign is a whole lot of people for Grijalva or something like that. Which I was amused.
So it's what Lotta rhymes with Grijalva,
or maybe this could be an opportunity for Nick LaLotta. I don't know what his campaign's committee is called, but it's a whole lotta for LaLotta. I mean, it's like a student council campaign.
That would be frowned on in New York.
Certainly not illegal, but frowned upon. No. So, there's your Royal Tenenbaums film reference for you all listeners out there. Meanwhile, and before we move on from some of these House races too, I mean because the Senate is also taking up a lot of space, if you will, because the battle there is just as close. But one other thing that is interesting, you mentioned, maybe in 2023 everybody got tapped out. In 2024 they were expecting a little bit more. We have had a change in leadership at the Republican National Committee. Donald Trump, has instilled his favored leaders there, and he's also he is facing a lot of legal bills and raising money to which is legal. This is all legal. Raising money to pay for those legal bills, and at a certain point, sometimes people may be like, well, I already gave, I gave to Trump. Like, what do I need? What else do I need to do? I mean, so some of those small donor, monies that may be paying for legal expenses and so forth, sometimes it's an opportunity cost, for people.
Well, and
that's
Trump
going to Trump's legal defense as opposed to Nick LaLotta or Mike Lawler's, campaign.
And Trump has never used his position to say, I need you to help Congressman X.
Yeah, Joe Schmo.
He'll endorse them and say he has my full and complete endorsement until he opposes them, but he's never used his email lists if he has, it's been few and far between, to direct money from his donors to a specific member. Right. Some of them piggyback on it and say, here's a picture of me and Donald.
Right.
But it's not like
like Act Blue, where they split the contributions among different people.
Yeah, and you see this in the Senate and especially like some of the senators who are off cycle, like Cory Booker will say, I need you to really help John Tester, right. And here's a picture of me and him working on this food bill together, that kind of stuff.
Or Food Inc. 2, our previous podcast, of which they both star in. All right, let's talk about the Senate. Lot of competitive races, in particular, three biggies: Montana, Ohio, Arizona, considered the most, the most competitive. But there are also other toss-ups, other developing competitive races in places like Nevada, Pennsylvania. Maybe Texas and Florida, depending on, the what happens between now and then. And then I also want to talk about Maryland a little bit, and because we're just seeing, again, gobsmacking amounts of money flowing into these races.
Yeah, I mean, so the one that everybody can't believe, I mean, Nathan Gonzalez wrote about this in his column last week, is that, Sherrod Brown in Ohio raised $13 million, which
it's a lot of clams, as they would say.
Yeah, I mean, and that's that used to be presidential campaign money, or that used to be the money you'd spend on a whole cycle,
right?
And now he's just raised it in a quarter. But the Republicans did just nominate a guy who had put millions of his own dollars into his own race. It's Bernie Moreno, who won the Republican primary in Ohio. John Tester. So essentially, just so the listeners know, Senate right now is 51-49 Democratic control. Democrats have essentially lost one of those seats when Joe Manchin decided he's not going to run. There's little chance that Republicans are going to keep little chance Democrats are going to keep that seat
in West Virginia.
In West Virginia. So now you're looking at 50-50 if every seat stays where it is, but Tester and Brown and are running in John Tester in Montana and Sherrod Brown in Ohio are running in states that Biden lost.
Right.
In Montana by quite a bit.
Right.
However, John Tester is a 2-term former governor. He's got a popularity.
Not governor. He's three-term senator, but before that he was in the legislature, but not governor.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm confusing him with
Steve Bullock, who ran for president.
He's built a rep. He's got a name. He does that thing. We were watching just on you mentioned the Mayorkas impeachment. He voted with the Democrats on this, but said he's really mad at Biden the way he's handled impeachment. Maybe that works. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know.
Right.
But he had about $12 million in his campaign. But the Republicans have tapped a businessman who could self-fund, Tim Sheehy. So they need this money, and money will only go so far in some of these states. I mean, you can buy all the time you want in Montana, but if everybody's going out there to vote for Trump, you really got to get them to switch. People don't usually vote for one party for president and another party for Senate anymore. There's very few states where those don't line up.
Right.
And what else? The other one I don't know if you mentioned was Wisconsin.
Oh, that's right.
Senator Tammy Baldwin is also facing a wealthy self-funder. She had $10.3 million in her account. Bob Casey in Pennsylvania, he had $11.9 million, but they're both facing, Republicans who could put a lot more millions into the race.
And Pennsylvania is very interesting too, because the Dave McCormick, who had lost a primary to Dr. Oz in 2022, and Oz went on to lose to John Fetterman. McCormick's back, and he has a lot of money. I mean, it's just like the perfect candidate, for self-funding, and is a little impervious to some of the money raising things. So even though Casey, raised more money and has more money on hand, McCormick's just one check away. Do people still write checks?
I keep saying that, and I really should stop. Maybe when you're writing that amount, you do. But yeah, when you're given $25, you're probably just doing it with a credit card. But I'm sure the candidates would like you to do it by check, because then they wouldn't have to pay the processing fee to the credit card company. But the interesting thing about the Senate map, and I know that a lot of Republicans think that Mitch McConnell is devil. Whenever you see the approved, disapproves numbers, he's one of the bottom because Republicans don't like him and Democrats don't like him. But it is a fact that the Senate Republicans built this field very well. They still got a few primaries to get through with some of their preferred nominees could get knocked out, but they avoided some of the fights, like in Pennsylvania, that tripped them up last cycle. I still amazed at that Pennsylvania race that John Fetterman won while in the hospital, or recovering from a stroke. That's a pretty hard race to beat nobody, So the Democrats, the way you can look at this is they're about as well positioned in some of these states as they could be, but it ain't over.
No, they're all. So many of these races are all the elections are going to be close at the presidential level, at the Senate level, at House levels.
The presidential is the big lever, right? I mean, if right now Biden and Trump are like this, well, Trump is up here, maybe, and Biden is coming up, right? In some polls, Biden has pulled ahead. If it's suddenly like this, then the map is going to be that way. If it's suddenly like this, then there's going to be a whole lot of races that go that way. And that just makes sense, because if people are excited to turn out for one candidate or another, and the enthusiasm level is much higher for Trump than it is for Biden. It's weird. The AP did a great poll. I love this, which is one on the Democratic side, people are more motivated by fear that Trump wins. On the Republican side, people are more motivated by wanting Trump to win. So which is a bigger motivator, fear or enthusiasm? We'll find out.
Yeah, no, it's true. And what makes it so tough, I think, in some of these races, like, again, everything comes back to Arizona for me, right? I mean, Arizona, Biden barely won it, in 2020. In 2022, Carrie Lake, who is, by some accounts the front runner, although, the sheriff in Pinal County, Lamb, is sort of, seems to be, getting a little bit more of the MAGA crowd, we'll see. I mean, Carrie Lake, I think, was still the prohibitive favorite because she was a gubernatorial candidate. But Lake, who's denied that she lost to 2022 to Democrat Katie Hobbs, she's, she just barely lost, in that, the Republicans were able to flip a couple of seats in Arizona. At the House level, the Democrats, favorite for the front runner for their nomination, Ruben Gallego, has raised a lot of money also, as we saw from his FEC filings. But, this is just one of those states, like my own state. It's like, so Biden barely won it. Trump won it by about 3 percentage points, I think, in 2016 over Hillary Clinton. Romney won it in 2012, but there's also some different dynamics there too, because Arizona has a very big Mormon population, so he probably got a little bit of a bump, even though he was running against a relatively popular incumbent in Obama. Obama didn't really contest it in 2008 because John McCain, was running, and McCain won it, relatively easily, but not in a blowout either. So it's just just Arizona, it's unpredictable. And also because the growth patterns in a place like Arizona or North Carolina or Texas or Florida, you got a different population every few years, with in-country migration and so forth, that it makes it sometimes a little uneven in predicting, who wins these races.
Yeah. I mean, and, you don't have Mark Kelly running again. Mark Kelly, seems to have done, is now beloved in that state, or is not feared, is not hated.
Right.
Astronaut,
motivators. Good profile. Astronaut, married to Gabby Giffords. Comes across as a moderate, at least, for some folks. Got a twin brother who's also an astronaut. I mean, and also let's not forget
from New Jersey.
All right. Before we talk about the criminal trial that I mentioned in the run-up, let's also just quickly touch on the Maryland Senate race. This is one of those races that Democrats like to take for granted because of the Democratic advantage that they have in registration in Maryland. But Larry Hogan, the popular former Republican governor, is running. He is likely to win the Republican nomination. And is a pretty good candidate because he knows his state well, and he's run a lot of races. They got a sandwich named after him at Chicken Ruth's Deli in Annapolis. I think it's him, not his dad. But I haven't been to Chicken Ruth's for a couple of years, but I'm pretty sure it's him, Larry. And then Democrats have this pretty close fight between Congressman David Trone, who is sort of the western part of Maryland into the DC suburbs around Bethesda and Potomac and so forth, and Prince George's County executive, also
Angela
Brooks. Yes. So this is going to be a close race. I mean, and let's just get the number out of the way first for Trone, how much money he's loaned his campaign.
42 million almost since the beginning of last year. He is, I don't know how much you watch broadcast TV, but he's everywhere. He's on Jeopardy every night. He had 4 ads on Saturday Night Live last weekend. He's smart. He's running against a black woman. He has black women in every TV ad. And it's an interesting thing he's pushing. It's he's definitely a rich guy. He owns a chain of liquor stores all around. Total Wine. But all around the region and up in Pennsylvania too and stuff like that. And he doesn't talk about, he tries to downplay, I guess, the image of being the rich guy by here's a guy whose kid died of an overdose and who showed up, David Trone, talking about these issues. And and now he's running an ad saying, like, I demanded this after the Baltimore bridge collapse. And he's got a woman longshoreman who was suddenly out of work, right? Because you can't go down and move containers off a ship when there's no ships moving, right? And he was the one who was demanding that the federal money come in to help, the workers who couldn't work. And it's it looks like a smart campaign so far. And also Brooks is, again, I'm looking at TV, right, which is probably what a lot of voters are seeing.
Right.
Also Brooks is coming in now. She's saying some interesting things too, but Hogan has this bed of goodwill that Democrats reelected him.
Right.
And we'll see. I would imagine once the primary is over, and I guess that's about 3 or 4 weeks from now, Trump will focus that energy on making people not like Larry Hogan as much. And this could come down to a fight. And I saw this many years in New Jersey. You have reasonable Republicans, but Democrats find a way to say when they get to the Senate, they're going to be a vote for everything Republicans will want to do in the Senate. And you try to make it about those issues. Abortion will be a big one, that kind of stuff. And, who knows? Could Larry Hogan go to the Senate and be one of the people who was huddling with Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski and those people? Maybe, but there'll still be a vote to make whoever the leader.
Right.
And there'll still be all these votes on cloture. And, so that'll be the fight.
Judges, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a fascinating race. It's also like, just for, to me, it's kind of interesting in that it shows this sort of center of influence, at least among Democrats, flowing more to this part of the state around the DC suburbs, and to have, someone like Trone, based largely in Montgomery County, the wealthy suburb of DC, and then also Brooks, at Prince George's County, the other side of the DC suburbs, and also I believe it's the highest per capita income for a majority African American county in the United States. The center of power is not. It used to be this, a little bit of a split between Baltimore and its suburbs in that area and the DC suburbs. And now it's like, if depending on who wins this Senate race, Hogan's like a little bit more, not DC suburbs, more Annapolis, a creature of Annapolis and other parts of the state. But if it's a Democrat, that sort of solidifies the power base outside of Baltimore, which is kind of a first, because Ben Cardin, who's giving up the seat to retire, is a Baltimore guy, former, state house speaker, and Chris Van Hollen, the other senator, is a, Bethesda, like Montgomery County guy. And just having that, like, that power base shift to DC away from Baltimore is just it's momentous, I think.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting. I don't know as much about the dynamics within the state, but what I understand is Baltimore County will also be the key bellwether who can carry that and how far that offsets anything in the other parts of the state. So there's a race there. And there are a couple of open seats that we're watching in Maryland as well, because several people are retiring, and it's not boring.
No, not at all. All right, well, let's end where we always have to end, which is in New Jersey. Let's switch back.
It's free to get in, but you have to pay a toll to get out.
It's like the Hotel California. Yes, yeah. You can check out anytime you want, but you can never leave unless you know the back and the back exit off the turnpike. Yes. So in New Jersey, Senator Robert Menendez is looks like his trial for corruption is going to be happening within the next couple of weeks. There are two different trials. Initially they were going to try him and his wife together, and it looks like they're going to be tried separately now. That scrambled that seat. Andy Kim looks like he'll wrap up the Democratic primary relatively easily. It's a Democratic state. It's always favors Democrats, but Menendez, depending on how long the trial goes, he's not going to run as a Democrat because he didn't file for the primary, but could run as an independent. But what do we know so far about the trial and where it's going and how it might affect things in November?
It's still a little up in the air. And the reasoning is that there was a lawyer who was involved representing one of the co-defendants in another case, which touches on this case. Menendez had been somehow getting involved in that other case. One of the charges centers on whether Menendez tried to influence the selection of the U.S. attorney to favor this co-defendant. So this lawyer has some information about what Menendez said or did there. But if he is called as a witness, he then can't represent this co-defendant as the attorney in the case. And if that happens, that pushes the case back. And the judge doesn't want to have 5 trials. They want to have 1 trial on this case. So the last I read is this could be settled today. It may be that the lawyer files a note, that they stipulation, they call it, with what his information is. And if that happens, then Menendez's trial expected to go forward in mid-May, which means if it's over by June 4th, maybe he files on primary day to run as an independent in November.
If he's not in prison. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as far as I know,
if he's exonerated or there's a hung
as
jury.
far as I know, that's not a disqualification for running for office. You can run for office from prison.
It makes things complicated.
The thing that it means, though, when we're talking about FEC, is Menendez has stopped raising money for a campaign that he's not running right now. His FEC report for the first quarter showed he took in $971 after refunds, but he also made $71,000 in interest because he has $5 million in the bank. Now, from that, he spent $550,000 on lawyers, and that's separate from about $200,000 that he raised and spent for a separate defense fund. But, you know, his bank balance was a lot bigger when he was first indicted, and it's been getting smaller because he is spending that on legal fees. He can spend it, and let's not lose the sight of the fact that Senator Menendez says he's innocent. He says that some of these charges are things that every senator does, and he gave a pretty impassioned floor speech a couple months ago, I think now, saying to senators, if they can come for you, they can come for. If they come for me on this, they can come for any of you on this. Now, all of the senators probably sat there and said, "Yeah, but there's no gold bars and piles of cash in my house." The other thing that developed is a disclosure that came out of a filing where it appears that Senator Menendez is going to say that he was misled, or could say that he was misled by his wife about certain things. So, which things those are, I don't know. But if it's his wife told him one thing and she did something else, that would make it harder for the government to prove, if the jury believes him, that he was taking these actions because he was receiving these benefits. Part of the charge is that, one of the co-defendants bought his wife a car. Maybe he thought that she was paying for the car. They had very recently married. I don't know what their family finance situation is. But, there's a whole lot he hasn't explained so far as the charges. And he said, I'll explain that when I'm on trial.
Yeah, I mean, just I could listen to you talk about these court cases and how weird it gets in there all day long. But I think actually what we should do is we should cut it off here and just wait for John Sayles, son of New Jersey, to make sort of a sequel to City of Hope that encompasses all this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, look, the other thing to keep in mind is the fallout from this is Menendez's son, Congressman Rob Menendez, who is in his former seat, which is now the 8th District, faces a primary challenge in Hudson County. And the fallout from the Menendez case and Kim getting in right after Menendez was indicted was a lawsuit ruling that totally disrupted the way primaries work in New Jersey. They're the thing called the line. And essentially what it is in many of the Democratic counties, if the county organization is with you, then you'd be on a line. It'd be Joe Biden, Andy Kim, or Joe Biden, Tammy Murphy, Rob Menendez, the congressman, county official, local official, all on one line. And then anybody running against those people might be floating over here in the ballot somewhere. And it made the line a very important factor in primaries. You almost never lost if you were on the line unless you were really hated. And it would have created this weird thing where, in some counties, but the fact is that Kim sued and the line has been thrown out by a federal judge. And this is going to disrupt politics in the state for years to come. But it also means that Rob Menendez, who would have been on the Hudson County line, now will be all by himself up against the mayor of Hoboken, Ravi Bala. And Rob Menendez could also lose. It's going to be a tough race for him. He's done, his family name still is very strong in Hudson County, and people in Hudson County, which is where I grew up, corruption isn't that thing. Everybody's corrupt. But what are you doing for me? So you're my corrupt. You do. So I'm not saying that Rob has done anything wrong, but it's just going to be the same name, and the mayor of Hoboken is going to be running against him, and you could see a whole lot of dominoes that fall as a result of this. The weird thing is, Republicans weren't sued over the line, so they'll be able to keep the line in this primary, and there's a guy who's running for Senate who's already put $600,000 of his own money, a businessman. He'll have some money to spend against Andy Kim, who looks like, for all intents and purposes, he's got the nomination locked up.
Yeah. So my takeaway is, wow, that's just a lot of money, like everywhere. I mean, and not to minimize, that we're, some people are facing hard times, but there is obviously no recession in politics right now. There's no.
Yeah, I mean, they could be spending
session.
it on Truth Social stock or something like that,
Anyway, well, Herb, thank you for doing. This is a lot of legwork that you and your team did going through these FEC filings. I mean, I saw you all working on it, and it's a big project, and it's very illuminating. So, I mean, this is. Again, not minimizing the other stories; they're all very important. But like this is also like a part of the ongoing narrative. So thank you for doing that.
You betcha.
And thank you out there for listening. We will see you next time on Political Theater.